This is The Open Podcast, where your host, Sander Mangel, and his guests share strategies and insights to help digital agencies thrive in a changing world. In this episode, Sander talks with Alexandru Ionescu, marketing strategy and e-commerce consultant, about launching an international brand in a new country.
Alexandru, thank you so much for joining. Getting into new markets in Europe is an absolute must. We're dealing with tiny markets. Even Germany, a big market, still has its limitation if you compare it to the US. Every country has its own language, has its own culture, habits, shopping habits. You respond better to your own language. Where do you start as a company, as a brand, as a B2B business? If a market is ready. So here in the Netherlands, Belgium is the obvious choice. But when you're a German company looking at Romania, how do you know your brand is ready to make the jump?
It's not an easy answer, to be honest. And I think that your question needs to be addressed from the standpoint of an entrepreneur of a corporation. So two distinct points of views, but regardless, there are common traits that both should take into consideration, because there's a lot of complexity. There's no common recipe. This is not an exact science. I would actually address the commonalities that there is actually in the marketing, in the strategic management and marketing theory, although let's not aim to have the discussion at academic level. There is a very popular framework, 70 and something years old. It's called the Ansoff matrix, actually. It brings a bit of structure into your mind when you're planning to get a certain market, So at least you should look into it a bit. Yeah. So it's the Ansoff matrix. That this is a marketing model that helps businesses determine its products and as well as the market strategy, especially when you are addressing a new market. So this is also called product market expansion grid. It has been created by very smart gentleman called Igor Ansoff. He was a Russian-American mathematician, and he actually introduced this model in 1957. US while writing an article for the Harvard Business Review magazine.
So trusted approach.
Yeah, actually, it brings a bit of clarity, because if you approach things only by taking risks and not having the clarity, you have high chances of not succeeding, regardless of if you are a small entrepreneur keen to get into e-commerce or trying to consolidate its e-commerce business, or a large organization. Mr. Ansoff said that when you are considering a new market, getting a new product or a new brand on a certain market, you take two, let's say, dimensions into consideration. One is the dimension of the products, and then is the dimension of the markets. So you have, for instance, if you have existing products on existing market, this means you are business as usual, and you're trying to compete on a certain market, business as usual. You're trying to do the best you can with the branding, with the communication, with the distribution, with the pricing and the pricing schemes and the mechanism and promos. So this is the market penetration. You do whatever you have to do in order to penetrate a certain market, and it gets to being competitive there. This is one. So taking sales from your competitors, that would be the market penetration. So it's existing risk, existing market. This is the least risky scenario when you get a brand on a new market. But market doesn't mean necessarily geographical market, but also a different segment of the market, so a different age group that you'd like to address. Then there is also you have an existing product, but you would like to put it on a new market. So existing product, but new market. That's called market development. So you need to develop the market and educate the consumers with regards to the new product that you are bringing. A new product and an existing market, and that would be product development. You develop that product to be able to sell it on a specific market. So here you focus a lot on cross-sales and focus on the brand loyalty that you already have. For instance, the AirPods, in the case of famous.
Yeah, so new product lines that align closely with your core product.
Exactly. And there is another scenario, for instance, when you would like to invest and to capitalize on it, which is you are planning to develop a new product and you also have a new market that you are preparing this product to. And this is the most risky scenario. Yeah. So you don't have knowledge with regards to the product, nor with regards to the specific market. So this framework actually, ANSOF, I think it's very useful. To clarify exactly what you are doing. The large companies perhaps invest a lot of time and resources in researching the specific market that they are trying to enter with a new brand or with a new product, and they do have extensive product development departments, R&D departments. So they are investing a lot into research, meaning understanding the buyers, understanding the demography, understanding the political, economic, social, technology landscape from that specific market that you're planning to enter. They are they are doing all sorts of SWOT analysis, dynamic SWOT analysis to understand the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats from a certain market. And they have educated guesses, and they are taking risks based on the research that they are doing, which is intensive. What else they are doing? They are doing pilot projects, actually. When they have a certain favorable go-to-market, in their opinion, they are doing pilots. So not going all the way into that specific market with a lot of investment, but testing.
Maybe the SWOT analysis part is interesting, right? Because we're looking at a new market and there's a couple of variables that you probably want to take into account. So let's assume that we're an entrepreneur, we're doing well, maybe we do 10 million in revenue, maybe even just 5 million. What are the variables that you take into account when you look to a new market, right? So looking at the ANSOF model, probably as a smaller entrepreneur, I don't want to diversify. I just want to use my tried and trusted product on a new market, right? It sounds like a more reasonable plan to have. How do I start with a SWOT analysis for maybe one or two potential markets?
Yes. So in the SWOT analysis, there are strengths and weaknesses, and these are yours as an entrepreneur and your brand's strengths and weaknesses. What do you have? What's the budget you can invest? What access information you have? What partners do you have in that certain market? These are your strengths, and as well as weaknesses. Maybe you're trying to avoid a certain, I don't know, scenario, warranty, so on and so forth. And these are yours. The strengths and weaknesses are yours and your brands. But there are also opportunities and threats on that specific market that you need to research. And there you need to actually to understand that specific market. How do you understand that specific market? That's an entire journey, actually, of research and education as well. And how do I do it, to be honest? You have Google Trends. You know Google Trends. Everyone can check Google Trends with a Gmail address. You can identify trends on that. So today, actually, I checked the Google trend for kendama. You know kendama, you have this trend in the Netherlands. Kendama toy. So it's a wooden toy, actually, with a ball, and you need to catch it, actually.
Isn't that old?
Man, it's old because that's why I checked and I don't understand what's happening. I have 7 years ago, it was a hype in Romania with that kendama toy. Everyone was on kendama, kids, and as well as adults, teenagers, influencers, stars, everyone, politicians, was with kendama, doing something with kendama, 7 years ago. And then we didn't hear anything about it, it's sunset naturally. And since 7 months, there is a mania of kendama and a hype with kendama, and people are investing a lot of money actually into this wooden toy. And you can see the trend on Google Trends, to be honest. It's a trend that you can see, and you can draw conclusions if your thingy, your keyword, your generic that you are looking for is trending or not, and then if you can capitalize on a certain demand or not. And this is, you just have an idea, you get an idea with regards to a trend. What else I'm doing a lot? I'm checking as an e-commerce specialist, trying to find different profitable concepts, brands, products. I check a lot, actually. Another tool which is called Google Ads, and there's Google Keyword Planner. The keyword planner from the Google Ads. What you can do with that, it's you discover demand. And that's possible for you. It's at your fingertips. You discover demand. And what do? You just enter a website that you are following or you are interested into, and you can discover exactly what is the volume of search that people are searching for different things, on that. So you just input the homepage of the website and you ask Google Ads Keyword Planner to tell you the volume of search. And you identify tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of keywords that are being searched monthly or on Google search, and you also see seasonality with regards to that. You can actually have an idea with regards to what type of products are working and when, and what is the volume of the search. So you can test it. And for instance, I'm giving you exact example. There is a madness with food supplements in Europe, Romania, as well as, I'm not going to mention US. And there are so many, food supplements like vitamins and minerals and all sorts of bundles and mixes, formulas, pool bars. And so if you are new to that, you can get overwhelmed. But if you are not new to e-commerce and you can actually see the demand with regards to those specific vitamins, and you can actually have an idea with regards to what's coming. And I wanted to test a food supplement store to see exactly the demand, the volume of their food supplements. And it's this product called bisglycinate of magnesium with 100,000 searches per month only in Romania. And I said, okay, I didn't know what is that, to be honest, that product, bisglycinate of magnesium. But I saw that it's 4 times, 5 times higher than any food supplement. Yeah. So this is just an idea of researching in Keyword Planner a certain website, a certain retailer, online retailer, and then going and working with a white label producer to create a brand. For instance, for top 5 food supplements, whatever. I'm just giving you an example. It might be success, not success. Yeah. So these are just 2 tools on how to be data-driven and to see the demand in a certain market from the Netherlands in Romania.
Yeah. No, but I love your approach, right? Because so what is very strong is, I think, with SWOT analysis that you start with yourself, right? I know my company, I know my strengths, my weakness, I know what worked, what didn't work already in my existing markets. Then online research is basically what you said, 2 tools, maybe a couple more. Just looking at, is there a demand, right? Probably as an entrepreneur, unless you're a big corporation, there's no point in going into a market where there's no demand, right? Because building demand takes years. I mean, it's much bigger risk, right? So going into a market where there is a demand, where there is a search volume, with the Google Ads tool, you can also see how much competition there is, right, on keywords. So you also know if there's not already complete market saturation by one company that bought everything up, I guess. So you can understand if there's even a point into entering the market. This is very concrete. This is desk research, but it's desk research that you can do in weeks, not years.
Yes. Anyways, so it's useful. You can validate some hypotheses that you have with regards to going into a certain market. On the other hand, it's not the entire story. If you're thorough with the research, you have higher chances of being successful. But you need to be risk taker as well, and to have experience, intuition as well. Yeah. So it's not only being desk research and being thorough with your research, but only have an intuition, because there are different triggers from the market that you need to see those as steps before another step that you would like to do on a certain market. And there is goodness in building a market. For instance, you are first mover advantage, you have higher margin, you have gains, image gains, and a lot of margin. But if you're a small fish, a small player, you do not have the power to educate a market and to build demand for that. And you don't have the power to sustain that. If you are successful, someone bigger will definitely buy you, and it will do a copycat, and it will invest much more than you are able to do. So advantages, disadvantages.
Yeah.
So if there's already a market, there's a fight on the margins. If there's already a market, if you are building a market, then you have premium margins, but it's very difficult to do that as a small entrepreneur.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's say I identify the market. I did some soul searching. I did the SWOT analysis. I have an idea of where I want to go. A Dutch brand or German brand or a French brand is probably not a one-on-one fit for the Romanian market or any other market, right? How do you start with adopting a brand to a new market without losing yourself, right? Because I still have my brand, I still have the same story to tell. However, this reminds me of a story I heard years ago where a Dutch brand that was selling those bikes where you can put the kids in the front, right?
The cargo bikes.
Soon.
Cargo bikes.
Thank you. Cargo bikes. And what they did is they went into the new market with exactly the same product photos and didn't sell Germany. And that they asked some specialists in the market and they said, well, yeah, the kids are in the cargo bike without a helmet on. It looks super unsafe, right? So from the Dutch perspective, you just put your kids in the cargo bike and you hope you don't have an accident. In Germany, that's complete madness, right? You have to have a helmet on. And I think that always stuck with me. That's such a small difference in cultural understanding can basically tank a whole go-to-market strategy, right? So where do you start with that? What is your approach? What is your approach there?
This is a very good question, actually, without an easy answer. I know I've been living in the Netherlands during my university studies, and I've noticed that those cargo bikes. Anyways, I'm sure that those are popular in Denmark, for instance. They might be popular there, and also in Romania. These are for enthusiasts, to be honest. So they are not mainstream yet, but they've been adopted by enthusiasts. It is what it is. So there is a Gert Hofstede. He was a Dutch researcher, actually. He worked for IBM in the 1950s, actually, and he studied cultural differences. So he studied cultural differences, and these differences make or break a certain brand on a certain market and your entry approach. And if I remember well, he characterized every nation in this world on four dimensions, which are long-term planning. So how do you plan? How do you foresee the future? Long-term planning. Uncertainty avoidance. How do you react in the face of uncertainty? Your approach as a nation. Masculinity/feminism, I think that's and distance to power. So all these dimensions, which later on have been developed further, characterize a certain nation, and you need to take those into account when going into a certain market, for sure. And you need to take into account other factors, like, for instance, with that cargo bike, if you have the infrastructure to be able to run those cargo bikes, is it fashionable to have a cargo bike, or you better buy a car even if you're stuck in traffic? How are you perceived? So how is your status if you're driving a cargo bike versus driving a perhaps second-hand car? Premium, ideally, whatever. So you need to take that into consideration. But to answer your question, to stay for a brand, I think it's important that that brand stays true and is faithful to its core values, brand purpose, values, and positioning on a certain market. But then that specific brand is flexible with how you land in that specific market and how you personalize and how you land specifically. So the successful international brands standardize the core, the values. They localize the meaning and they earn trust market by market, taking into consideration the traits, the cultural traits, economic, the political, the social, the technological traits of that specific market. It's the same cliche of think globally but act locally, I would say. And one example, for instance, of this, it's I've been involved in landing some fish cans actually in the Romanian market from a Spanish brand producer, Arlequin, they were called. So you say it's tuna, it's the same fish, it's the same tuna, but no, it's not actually. Even for cans, you need to adapt for your specific market. So the cartoons, for instance, instead of having 50 pieces in a carton, now you have 12, so smaller sizes. And this is one example. Another example is, look, it's the most famous example of Mitsubishi Pajero. You know Mitsubishi Pajero.
Yeah.
car actually. Yeah, it's a tank. It's a well-known tank. But
Yeah.
they didn't in South America actually. They didn't go with Mitsubishi Pajero. Yeah, they go with Mitsubishi Montero. Although it was the same car, they named it differently because Pajero in a slang, in a Spanish slang, means something not very nice actually. Yeah, with a sexual connotation. So they had to actually change the name, even though the car it was an icon in the entire world. So they so that they can enter into a specific market.
Yeah. I loved it. So I see a lot of companies struggling with that, right? I
Yeah.
think every company that wants to internationalize, they come at some point to the same choice. Do I organize everything from the home country, let's say, from the HQ, and delegate out, maybe hire a local marketing agency, but that is about it? Or do I decentralize, find a country manager, and basically have them run their operations? Now, again, I know it's not an
Yeah.
easy answer, but
Mm.
what do you recommend?
So yes, this is a tough question, and it has to do with landing in another country. Recently, I've been contacted by Czech online food supplements retailer trying to get into the Romanian market. So now is this express option where you can have your warehouse and team in Czech Republic, for instance, or in Germany or in the Netherlands, and do the fulfillment from those countries and have less operations in Romania, for instance. Yeah, this is the cross-border option when they are dispatching with, I don't know, 5-6 euros cost of shipping. We send it to the Romanian customers. They have an address where they can get back the returns, and that's it. And that's it. They enter a market. So they have low entry barriers on the market with this cross-border option. This is fashionable lately. We have shoes retailers doing that, entering a market, attacking a market. We have lightning retailers with warehouses in Poland that are dispatching directly to Romania in 2-3 days. Yeah, because for certain goods, you do not need delivery in the next day. Yeah, you're
Right.
okay for if you're buying a lamp, you're okay to get it in 5 days or 4 days. You don't need it in the next days. So this is one model, yeah, where you minimize the risks of going into a certain market with a certain brand. You don't have warehouse. You don't even have employees. You just pay invoices if you find those relevant people to help you with, and you do it from abroad. This is one model. Another model, it's you go with a distributor from there. Your brand. You give your brand to a certain distributor, and you give that certain distributor the exclusivity to sell your specific brand in a certain geography. But then there are limitations here as well because the distributor it's not usually a marketing business. Yeah, so they are good with the logistics and distribution, but less with building a brand, creating an image, promoting that, differentiating it, so on and so forth. So building demand. So up to a certain point, for when you penetrate a market, going with a distributor can be an approach as well. Even the Chinese car brands, when they entered in Romania, they didn't open directly showrooms here with local management, and so they went with big players in the car market, and this is how they are landing in Romania. Also, one of the most famous American electronic brands, everyone has it. They have a very small office in Romania, even though perhaps 30% of the market of the mobile phones is theirs. And then when you're very successful, when you become very successful and you have validated that specific market, you have tractions, you have a fan base, people are buying in from it, you're starting to gain market share, you establish operations in that specific market. This is how I see it in e-commerce and in businesses of products of distribution. On the other hand, if you are a small entrepreneur doing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, a few million euros, then you need to have a different approach here. You research like crazy similar market with yours to see what products are popular there, what niches are popular there, because you don't only go with a certain product that you think it's successful. You go with a portfolio. You need a portfolio that addresses a certain pain point of that buyer that you ideally know. So you find those portfolios. You look at those markets. You look online. I know a very successful entrepreneur, small entrepreneur in Romania, who brought a portfolio of products because those were very popular on Amazon in Germany. So he looked in Amazon in a certain category. He saw those products as being bestsellers and having good reviews, and he brought it to Romania. He's doing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, with that specific portfolio only by researching Amazon. Yeah, and you can do that with Reddit. You can even automate this research.
Love what you say there with the pain point, right? Because you do not just look at the products, you're looking at the experience, the scenario.
So I think that it requires to be focused actually on the value proposition and to know exactly what you are offering. Exactly what pain point are you addressing exactly, and for whom you are relevant, because this is one of the mistakes that you can do, to try to communicate and be everything to everyone and to target all the people, because all the people might go to the beach regardless of age, lifestyle, and so on and so forth. So you would get lost, to be honest, if you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Again, it's right, understanding yourself, understanding your product before you start to look at the different market.
When you are a small entrepreneur, to be honest, you can take risks, and you can win, you can lose, but if you lose, you don't lose that many millions, because you have to test what you're doing. So if you're into, for instance, e-commerce business, you can go to a trade fair in China, I'm giving an example, or India, negotiate a minimum order quantity with that specific uh, seller at their booth, try to add your logo and on the product, on the package, negotiate 1,000 pieces, you bring them, or even less, to be honest, and you test the market. And you can even afterwards create a brand and register your brand in Europe with that. So you can test on smaller batches. You can test it. In contrast, if you're a large one, you can't do that actually, because there's an army of people deployed in launching that specific product and testing in a certain market. Yeah. So advantages, disadvantages.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. If you're small, you're nimble, test it out, launch something quick, do a couple of AdWords campaigns, see if it gains traction, and then move from there, right?
Sander, for some people, this can be a recipe. For others, it's not. Some have succeeded, others have failed. I don't think it's an exact science and a correct recipe, and it depends. But if you're taking risks, and if you're educated and you do your due diligence and the research and everything into it, and you have a bit of experience, you know what you're doing, I think there are good odds that to succeed, even though wherever you are looking, it's a lot of competition. Yeah, it's a lot of competition. Yeah, it's a lot of competition. One thing that is coming, I think, inspired by the traditional commerce in the e-commerce, it's the prevalence of the private label brands. So where all the retailers will develop different tiers of private label brands to be able to promote it and sell it to their loyal customers. And this way they get more margins, and they can sustain a business. Because as a small entrepreneur, as a small retailer, there are not enough profits in selling, for instance, an A brand. I was working for a few years at a German retailer selling do-it-yourself products and tools. And we were selling, for instance, power tools. We were selling power tools, German brands, but we had a margin of 5%,
Right.
7%, 10%. So we were not profiting from that. We were selling it, yeah, but we were not winning anything, man. So having those brands, even though we brought the brands from Germany and we had good prices, buying prices in Germany because we were selling volumes there. Even though trying that, small, tiny margins. So you do not survive with that. Those products were interesting for us, those brands, because those brands brought traction, brought visitors.
Right.
They were very liquid. As soon as we got them on the inventory, they were gone. So winning small, but we were selling different other things. For instance, why it was important for us to offer those products? Because we won a client, that we would be able to retarget in and do cross selling and do loyalty and bring him back, in the store. It was profitable for us because we were able to sell accessories, power plugs, drills,
Right.
And many other things, in the order, not specific that tool. So at the end of the day, it was okay to have those products. We were not eating the lunch from the power tools, from those brands,
No.
And I think that in the future, this can be valuable for a large retailer as well as for a small one. It's okay to have those brands in your portfolio. You are getting into a global fight in terms of pricing.
Yeah.
But for instance, as a retailer, if you have the cross-sell widgets on your checkout and then push other things from your store to that specific buyer, it's a win for you. What else is interesting? If you go on a physical retail store, those physical retail stores, they have their private label power tools, for instance, but they're not aggressively pushing it if you want to buy, for instance, a German, very notorious brand. Yeah? But they are suggesting things. Look, this is more powerful, this is more advantageous, this is whatever. So you go there at the store, you have a few famous brands in your mind, but then the seller it's able enough to convince you that their private label is equally good, but you pay a lower price. And this is what you can do as an online retailer with your checkout account and with your marketing automation to send very targeted intent messages to those that have bought a certain power tool brand in the past and so on and so forth. So this type of data it's valuable, and these types of mechanism of cross selling, these are valuable for a retailer when they will be more into the private label brands in the future. For sure.
Yeah.
If you're a small entrepreneur, I think there's a lot of value into developing your brand as well, rather than sell generic brands, generic products, or A-level brands. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value because if you are successful, even if you are a small one and don't do a lot of money, you have potential in selling that brand at the end of the day after 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, and that brand can mean 5 times, 10 times more than your entire revenue with that specific product. So it can be valuable.
Yeah. That's a super interesting approach, right? So you come into a new market, you sell the famous brands that will gain you traction. All the mean you start to prime the market for your own brand that has a lot more revenue at the end of the day. I love that. Before we wrap up, what is the one biggest pitfall that you want to tell people to avoid and to leave them with that? The one thing where you went, I should not have done that.
One thing it's very important. So in general, when you're doing everything in life and in business and on e-commerce, and the odds are against you by default. The odds are against you by default. Even if you check all the check boxes, sometimes you nail it, other times you not. The odds are against you if you're doing everything right. But if you don't do everything right, communication, focus, who is your buyer, pain points, what product do you offer, and pricing and distribution and all these things. So if you don't do it right, you might not be in the market. So pricing for sure it's very important, especially in Romania. Pricing is very important, and price positioning. How do you position yourself? What are you? Are you a mid-tier brand? Are you a premium brand? Are you a premium brand and you're offering discounts? What are you doing? You're diluting your brand. You mess it up if you do that. So pricing would be very important to pay attention on that. And if you have, remember the Ansoff matrix, if you go on the penetration, I think pricing is very important. You have to penetrate the market, to have a good pricing. But there are so many other things that you can fail, actually, to be honest with.
Yeah.
Be everything to everyone. That would be another thing that you need to address in your communication. Some other things would be if you bring an international brand to the Netherlands or Germany or Romania, only translate things and not localize. The jokes, the communication, the strapline, the main messaging, the everything. So only localizing it like flat with your online tool. That's
Google Translate.
or not a good idea. Yeah. So you need to localize it.
I love what you're saying there because you can experiment. You should experiment, right? You should be nimble, but at the end of the day, you only have one opportunity to make an impression. So make sure that you know what the price you're selling at and what have you, right? What kind of a brand you want to be. I think that's good practical advice. Alexander, thank you so much for this conversation. I loved it. A lot of insight. I think a lot of practical insights, right? It's not easy to gain a new market, but how you laid it out, there's definitely stuff you can do to take a first step. So very much appreciative of you sharing that here.
Sander, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to bring my 2 cents. There's no exact science. People know better than me how to land. I just gave it my perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sander, for the invitation.